your notes from yesterday. So yesterday we copied down the definition of reason. Okay. Was there anyone who was not here yesterday?
Me?
Okay, and you should probably be sitting up here.
I can see it.
Okay, so here's your objective from yesterday. The objective is that 10th grade ELA students will be able to develop specific textual evidence and an organization for arguing in an essay.
We speak student.
Ethos, logos, pathos. A la shmup. Kind of like Larry, Curly, and Moe. We all hate losing arguments. It feels good to be right, but it feels even better to convince someone else that you're right, and then maybe rub their face in it a little bit. Woo! What if you had a bag of tricks that you could go to anytime you felt someone needed a little persuading? Thanks to Aristotle, the great thinker from ancient Greece,
I'm smarter than you.
we have 3 such tricks that will often get the job done. They're not foolproof. In other words, they won't usually get you out of mowing the lawn or doing the dishes. But if you're writing an argument essay and want a reader to see, understand, and agree with your point, these tricks are the bee's knees. Collectively, they are referred to as rhetorical devices. You want to know what they are? Sorry, that's a rhetorical question. The 3 devices are called ethos, pathos, and logos. Once you've mastered these tools, you'll be able to write a stellar essay, win political debates, and sell just about anything on late-night television. Let's start with ethos. Ethos means moral character. When the speaker uses ethos, he's trying to persuade his audience by convincing them that he's a good guy. So if you pin someone up against a wall and demand that they prefer Coke to Pepsi, it's probably not the most effective means of persuasion. But if that same person gets the sense that you're a decent human being who just wants to discuss the subject in a calm manner, he may be more willing to see another side of the issue. But moral character alone isn't going to get her done. Enter pathos. Pathos means emotion. As a rhetorical device, pathos gets us to stop thinking and start feeling. Something political pundits seem to have down to a science.
Oh yeah.
Feelings, whoa, 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 feelings. Does this mean we have to get all lovey-dovey and mushy-washy? Well, no, but sometimes appealing to someone's softer side can do the trick. If you're trying to convince a reader that crude oil is bad for the environment, don't just cite figures and fill up the pages with a bunch of charts and graphs. Talk about the animals that are affected. Bambi. And often killed when there's a spill. It will only help your case if you can get your reader to cry over spilled oil. And then there's the 3rd and final rhetorical device, logos. Logos means reason, think, logic. Here is where all those aforementioned charts, graphs, and figures come into play. But it's also about explaining to your reader in clear and concise terms why they should logically agree with your point of view. It's about providing concrete evidence to support your claims. If you can make them feel stupid for daring to think anything different, all the better. But what's the name calling you?
Nerd.
So when writing an argument essay, don't set pen to paper without the big 3 in your corner. Ethos, meaning moral character, pathos, meaning emotion, and logos, meaning reason. You may also want to use Oreos, which won't add anything to your argument, but they sure are delicious.
Big Fat Review. Ethos. Moral character. Used when trying to persuade audience that a character is a good person. Pathos. Emotion. A rhetorical device used to get readers to stop thinking and start feeling. Logos. Reason. Using clear and concise terms to help readers see logically why they should agree with your point.
Whoa, 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 feelings.
Here, we are only going to copy down definitions 2 and 3. And out of those three different types of appeals or rhetorical devices, we are only going to focus on logos, also known as logic, because it is the most professional of the three and the most appropriate for our school setting. Definition number 2 reads, a particular method of reasoning or argumentation. And definition number 3 reads, the system or principles of reasoning applicable to any branch of knowledge or study. But it is very important to understand that the other 2 rhetorical devices or types of appeals are effective when trying to persuade someone. Pathos is effective when trying to appeal to someone's emotional side. Copy down definition number 1, which reads, the quality or power in an actual life experience or in literature, music, speech, or other forms of expression of evoking a feeling of pity or of sympathetic and kindly sorrow or compassion. If you are trying to use pathos in writing, it would really all depend on the types of words that you use, also known as your tone. Now, in informal writing, you could simply use all caps. When speaking, as said in the video, you could utilize crying, or another method would be raising your voice. Yelling is always an effective way to evoke intimidation or fear. And then the last one is ethos. We are only going to copy down definition number 3, which reads, the moral element in dramatic literature that determines a character's action rather than his or her thought or emotion. Now, in the video, it stated that ethos is the speaker's moral character. However, with ethos, you can also use the person who is being spoken to or the person who is trying to be persuaded. You can also use their moral characters or beliefs against them in order to persuade them as a means of making them feel bad for making the wrong decision based on how they were raised and taught. Turn to page 492 from your language network book. Okay, so if you follow my steps, you should be definitely on your way to having your paper start off very well. Next week, we are just going to write and type next week. That's all this preliminary stuff has to get out the way. So you should at least have down the reasons of why, page 492, you should have down the reasons of why your thesis is what it is. So just like we did on the 492, I said that. So just like on the op-ed, just like on the op-ed assignment, Devin, just like on the op-ed assignment, you gave your reasons for why you felt the way you did about the YouTube topic.
What page?
492.
Why would this give me a reason?
Because the people were asking yesterday, I had to write down the definition for
What was
reason.
that for?
Yeah.
Whatever we want. Lisa Samsung Galaxy S8.
Alright. Here is the definition for reasoning. Copy down, if you weren't here, copy down number 2. Okay? It is the process of forming conclusions, judgments, and inferences or from facts or premises. Ahmad, what is our objective?
Compare, contrast, create thesis statements with support.
Kind of voices are. Okay, thank you. So by the end of this lesson, 9th grade ELA students should be able to, I said I need voices off. By the end of this lesson, 9th grade ELA students should be able to compare and contrast. So we're using yesterday's concept in order to figure out what's a thesis statement and what's not a thesis statement. We'll probably get to that part tomorrow to decipher what a good thesis statement looks like and what a very poor one looks like, so that you know not to make the mistakes in the poor one. And then overall how to create your own. So before we get to that though, let's go ahead and discover what a thesis statement is. I'm going to show you a video. Copy down definition number 1 for a thesis, which reads a proposition stated or put forward for consideration, especially one to be discussed and proved or to be maintained against objections.
Okay, writing a thesis statement is all about figuring out the main idea for your paper and then explaining that main idea to your reader. But where to begin? Begin with the question you're answering with your essay. We'll use the scarlet letter as an example. Let's say your teacher gave you the following question as your essay topic. What role does the scarlet letter A play in Hawthorne's novel, and why is it important? Step 1. Assuming you've read the book, and really you can't write a paper without having read the book, answer the question off the top of your head.
Is that right?
Question. What role does the scarlet letter A play in Hawthorne's novel, and why is it important? Preliminary thesis. In the scarlet letter, the letter A is a symbol. That's a good start, but you haven't answered the whole question. Remember that the second part of the question is, and why is the A important? Step 2. So now you need to refine your answer. At this point, you'll probably need to look back at your notes about the book to figure out why the A is important. After you do, revise your thesis statement. Question. What role does the scarlet letter A play in Hawthorne's novel, and why is it important? Revised thesis. In the scarlet letter, the letter A is more than a symbol. It actually helps define Hester's identity. That's not a bad thesis, but remember that your thesis sends the reader off into your essay, not just knowing what you're going to write about, but how you're going to make your case. In other words, you want to give your reader a little bit more direction. This is where examples come in. Step 3. Before you finish refining your thesis, you need to know which examples from the book are going to help you make your case. For this question, we might look at the way the meaning of the scarlet letter A changes over the course of the novel. First, it defines Hester as an adulteress. Later, it shows how able Hester is. And finally, it comes to stand for angel as Hester takes control of her own identity. So, with these examples in mind, let's revise that thesis statement one more time. Question. What role does the scarlet letter A play in Hawthorne's novel, and why is it important? Finalize thesis version 1. In the scarlet letter, the letter A is more than a symbol. It actually helps define Hester's identity, transforming her from an adulteress to a woman who's able, and finally into an angel. That's a great thesis, if I do say so myself. But I want to point out something that happened as I wrote that thesis. Sometimes when you start working with examples, an even deeper, more nuanced response to the question emerges. So here's an optional final step. Step 4. Ask yourself, am I really saying all I could be saying with my thesis? Am I really saying it in the clearest possible way? Or are my examples leading me to tweak my thesis and say something a little different, a little deeper? If your answer to any of these questions is yes, revise again. Question. What role does the scarlet letter A play in Hawthorne's novel, and why is it important? Finalize thesis version 2. In the scarlet letter, the letter A isn't just a symbol of Hester's downfall. As Hester moves from adulteress to a woman who's able, and finally to an angel, the A becomes a symbol of Hester's agency in defining her own identity. Let's look at those steps one last time. To write your own killer thesis statement. 1. Answer the question. 2. Refine your answer, making sure you've answered all parts of the question. 3. Refine your answer into a more focused thesis statement by including a reference to the examples you plan to use. 4. Refine your thesis so that it answers the question not just in a focused way, but also in a creative, thoughtful, even profound way. There you have it, an awesome thesis statement and a solid foundation for an A+ essay.
Alright, so she gave us a lot of information on how to edit our thesis, and now we're going to go through how to, what is a thesis? Okay, so now we're going to go through there. We're going to take some notes.
Moving from loosely grouped ideas to an organized evidence to express a significant point about the story drawn from the observation.
Okay, so we start off with loosely grouped ideas. So when I say that we're writing an essay on the similarities and the differences of X-Men versus the Civil Rights Movement, some people had some ideas going as we were going through both of them. Okay, some people stated those ideas and some people's ideas were correct. Okay, so it's like, how do we get from these ideas to the last submission of your research paper and being done? Okay, well, first you have to have some type of focus, okay, from the observations from those two entities. So a thesis sentence is what? Quest. Thesis sentence is what?
A thesis sentence or claim will give direction, shape, and purpose to the entire essay. The thesis is a one-sentence statement of the central idea of your essay. It focuses the topic so that both you and your reader will know just exactly how you intend to interpret the story.
Okay, so let's read this together so we're all on the same page. I need us to read this like a choir in unison. Okay? Everybody. 3, 2, starting where it says a thesis sentence. 3, 2, 1. A thesis sentence or claim will give direction, shape, and purpose to the entire essay. The thesis is a one-sentence statement of the central idea in your
It focuses the topic so that both you and your reader know the story. That's exactly how you intend to interpret.
Okay, good. So let's write that down. We've heard it being read to us, we've read it, and now you're going to write it. So you have multiple encounters with this. Okay, I want you to write down the red. Write down the red.
That sounds good.
All the red?
No.
Yes.
Some of the red.
So, what you'll come to see is that a thesis statement is really just an opinion. That's all that it really is an opinion. An opinion that we back up with facts. So usually if I was teaching persuasion and argumentation, I would do my PowerPoint on facts and opinions, okay, where we would decipher the difference between the two. So a thesis statement is just you giving your opinion on a topic. We give opinions all day long. So an example, we're in the NBA Finals. A lot of the conversations that are going on starts with an opinion of the best basketball player. So some people say that LeBron James is the best basketball player. Okay, well you have to back that up with facts. Okay, so we use facts to back up opinions. Okay, so the next thing is that it's just one sentence. It's just one statement that is going to basically commit you to that one position throughout your entire essay. So everything in your essay has to relate back to this one statement. So if I say the sky is green, everything that I'm talking about in my essay relates back to that. I don't start going off on tangents and talking about anything that comes to mind. Everything has to relate to proving that the sky is green. Otherwise, why did I say it? Okay? Right. Okay. Les Charette. Let's move to switch gears to Les Charette. Can you continue at it, guides?
It guides you with your selection of material to include in your.
I don't see that. Oh, I'm sorry.
In your choices of what to exclude from consideration.
Okay, so once you have that one statement and you've committed yourself to that statement, now you use all the information that you've read, Jamar set up, you use all the information that you read to find support for it. So now you have to find support for it. So now you know what you're looking for. So now we use the skill of skimming. Okay, you don't want to reread necessarily. You just want to skim through stuff that you've already gone through or stuff that's on the same topic. You want to skim through it so that you can find information that supports what you're talking about. Okay, so and that's what the purpose of it is to do, is to help guide you. What does a good thesis look like, Lay? What's a good one?
Read it.
No, just look at it.
Probably a good one. A good thesis or thesis is a clearly stated subject and a strong verdict.
Okay, thank you. A good thesis or a claim, or in debate class you would call it a proposition or a resolution or an opinion, all of them. A good thesis or claim sentence has a clearly stated subject. That means the who or what that you're talking about. It's clearly stated. Your reader knows exactly who or what you're talking about. Should I sit up? Okay? And it has a strong verb. Okay, so what about it? This is your subject, this is what you're talking about, who you're talking about, what about it? Okay? Okay. So, next.
It is expressed.
Okay, am I?
No, I was just telling whoever was reading that was what you was explaining that.
Thanks for volunteering. Can you go ahead and start here?
It is expressed in concrete, specific words, and it commits the writer to particular task in paper.
Okay, concrete, specific words. So what's a weak one?
A weak thesis sentence is a vague in diction and meaning, and leaves so many options open. The writer must still make hard decisions about what to include or omit.
So omit means to take out. So if yours is vague means it's unclear. And diction is wording. So if your wording is unclear, that means you don't have a focused thesis. And if you don't have a focused thesis, you don't know where you're going in your paper. You're like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to write this up and turn this in and get an F on it. That's all I want to do. Because that's all you're going to get if it's not focused. Because you'll be all over the place. So that's what a weak one is. And we'll get to that tomorrow, how a weak one looks and how a strong one looks. But again, you'll know what to include and what to omit. So the essential question that you're trying to answer, and there will be an overall question, because she told us in the video to begin with a question. The overall question that you're going to answer is, your essential question is that you have to answer for your readers is how you arrive at that thesis or that conclusion. Okay? So let's write down the red right here. Okay? That's the essential question that you have to answer when creating your thesis.
Stop touching me, bro. Stop touching me.
Right, how do you arrive? Or
Start with how you arrive at the conclusion you have stated in the thesis sentence. Okay, so once you create your thesis, the new red. So once you create your thesis, that's the new question that you're trying to answer throughout your essay. How did I get to this conclusion in the first place? That the sky is green. Shoot, I got some, backing up to do with this.
Good credit.
Okay? What evidence in the story made that conclusion logical? Okay? Meaning you can back it up with reasoning. There's reasons of why it's like that. It's logical. Okay? Or inevitable. Inevitable means that everybody's going to come to this answer of it. And, there's no other answer to come to. Okay?
How to write a killer thesis statement, a la Schmuck. First of all, what do we mean by a killer thesis statement? Should this thing be armed and dangerous? Well, kinda. No, we don't want to see your thesis statement show up on the evening news. But your thesis statement should aim to kill, with eloquence, suspense, intrigue, originality, and clarity. Here's an example. Humans are not genetically required to be meat eaters, so vegetarianism is the only moral choice to avoid the senseless killing of animals.
That's an opinion.
It states a valid point, expresses a strong opinion, and can be supported with facts. Doesn't mean it's necessarily true, but it can definitely be debated. A thesis statement is that thing at the very beginning of your paper that tells your reader what this whole thing is going to be about. Right out of the gate, it tells your reader roughly what elements you will develop in the coming paragraphs and exactly how you feel about it. The thesis is the most important part of your essay. It's the heart, soul, and brain of your paper. Once you've got that puppy figured out, you're at least halfway home. How do you get to this promised land? Well, first you got to establish an issue or problem. Think humankind's negative effects on rainforests, the factors that enable politicians to become corrupt, the slow death of the film industry, anything ripe for the picking, and preferably something that is not without a little controversy. Thesis shouldn't be something like, the sun makes it hot outside, because you're not going to hear much argument from anyone on that point. Instead, it should be something interesting, something that perhaps your reader hasn't previously considered. Don't hold back, go right for the gut. To make sure you've got an interesting topic, ask yourself questions someone else might ask you. Play devil's advocate with yourself until you're certain you've covered all the bases. Keep in mind that you're not just laying down the facts, you also want to get your message across. So be sure to express your thoughts on the issue. Take a strong position. It's not enough to state that for the last 20 years, America has actually become more racist than it was in the 1990s. If your position is that, yeah, maybe, I don't know, could be, who cares? It's an intriguing proposition, but it's not going to go anywhere if you plan on being wishy-washy. Either argue strongly for or against the idea. It's the only way you're going to bring your reader to their knees. So what's a good thesis and what's a bad one?
Okay, what did we say yesterday were the components of a good thesis?
Strong word.
Okay, it has a strong verb. What else does it have?
Clearly state.
Clearly stated
Subject.
subject. Okay, Kalia's on the roll. Kalia's the only one who's going to pass this class. Who else
Strong
is?
sentence.
A what?
Strong verb.
Strong verb.
It express the concrete specific words.
Yeah, it's expressed in concrete specific words. That means it's not unclear. Okay, we know exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, so let's look at some.
Okay, here we go. Good thesis. World travel is an essential element in any young person's well-rounded education. Bad thesis. There are some great places to visit in Europe, dude. Good thesis. More than anything else in our society, video games are responsible for the dumbing of America. Bad thesis. People are dumb.
That's not accurate at all.
Okay, so I like that when they said that, some of you had something to say. So again, let's look at the subjects between the two. What's the subject in the good thesis? Shania? What's the subject in the good thesis?
Video game.
It's not the subject there. Which one of these words do you think is though? Which one of these words do you think is the subject in this one?
Who?
Shania. Which one do you think is the subject? Which word?
Word.
Good thesis.
I think it sounds like transgender.
What'd that say?
It says, more than anything else in our society, video games are responsible for the dumbing of America.
I ain't dumb.
But what's the subject? What's the who or what this statement is about? What are they talking about?
The video game.
Thank you. The subject is video games. Okay, all of this other stuff before is just answering information.
Good thesis. When an elderly person is deciding on a pet, adopting a cat is a far better option than adopting a dog. Bad thesis. Cats rule. Dogs rule. Get the idea? It should be broad enough that a large portion of your audience will be able to relate, but specific enough that you can zero in on a particular topic and really dissect it. Finally, you can't just state your thesis, drop the mic, and walk off stage. You'll need to bring some supporting points to the table. So be prepared to back your thesis up with some actual factual pieces of evidence. And while quality is certainly more valuable than quantity, have at least 3 supporting points. Any less, and your thesis is going to be a bit flimsy. Put all this together, and you should have a killer thesis statement. If you're absolutely stumped and can't come up with one on your own, you can borrow ours. It gets out on parole in about 3 months.
Big Fat Review. 1. Establish an issue or problem. 2. Express your own opinion on the issue. 3. Introduce supporting topics. 4. Have at least 3 supporting points.
Okay, let's write this down. We need you to put that away. Alright, so looking at 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B.
Can't see that.
Scoot up if you having trouble seeing it. Sign your pass, sign your pass, sign your pass. Consider the 2 pairs of thesis statements below. Which ones would really, which ones would be really useful to a writer planning an essay? Which ones would provide little focus? So, Quantes, read 1A. Mallory.
Mrs. Mallard is a woman facing a unique substitution.
Almost. Situation. Yes, thank you. So Mrs. Mallard is a woman facing a unique situation. What's the subject here? So the who or what the sentence is about is facing? Mrs. Mallard. Thank you. Remember the subject is always the who or what the sentence is about. So it's about Mrs. Mallard. What's the verb?
Is.
Is the verb. Okay, so Mrs. Mallard is. We said isn't really that strong. So let's see if we can find a different verb in the second one that's a little stronger. But what is Mrs. Mallard doing in the first one?
Facing a situation.
She's facing a unique situation. Okay, so what does it mean by unique?
It's not the normal situation.
It's not the normal situation.
Once in a lifetime.
Once in a lifetime.
Gradable.
Huh?
That's enough for a shot.
What does unique mean?
One of a kind.
One of a kind.
That pretty much sums it up. Not asking anybody to say.
Well, it sounds like we have a bunch of different answers for unique because unique seems to be kind of unclear. So let's say that you went to the mall, okay, and you bought some new fits, and you were going out that night, and you were going to the basketball game, and you were like, bro, am I A1 or what? And your boy was like, I mean, that's what you wearing? You look unique, I guess. All right, let's go.
Different.
What you mean unique, man? I'm A1. Look at this. I'm A1. He like,
you talking about
bruh,
your outfit right now?
let's go. You look unique. It's whatever. Unique doesn't describe anything. Okay, you wouldn't know whether you look unique in a good way or a bad way. So this is kind of unclear about the situation. It's unique. Okay, maybe it's once in a lifetime. Maybe it's this or that. Okay, let's go to the second one. Devontae, read the second one.
We see Ms. Mallard from contrasting
Perspectives.
the exterior view that others have of her and the interior view that we gain through chopping revelation of her thoughts.
Awesome. So what is the subject in this one? Cross it up. What's the who or what we're talking about? Who are we talking about in here? We're talking about her, but we're talking more of her in this one. Actually, the subject in this one is we. So it's saying we the reader, or we the writer. Okay, if we read the book, we the reader. Okay, we do what? What's the verb in here? See. Okay, the verb is see. Okay, so is or see, which one is stronger?
Let me see.
I think see is stronger. Okay. When we say see, when we say is, we don't know what that is. Is it's just a state of being. We don't know what that is. But when we say see, we can say either literally they're saying something or figuratively they're saying something. So we know what the subject is. See who? Mrs. Mallard from contrasting perspectives. We said that contrasting means what? Not comparing. Contrasting is opposite of comparing. Different. Okay? So we see Mrs. Mallard from different perspectives. Those perspectives, whenever we see a dash, that usually means that what's coming after is explaining what came before. So those different perspectives are the exterior view that others have of her. So in the story, we see what people see of her physically. Okay, she's a raggedy old woman who wears beat up clothes, possibly. Okay, and then the other view that we see of her is the interior view that we gain through the author Chopin's revelation of her thoughts. So the author lets us in her mind. Okay, so we see what people see of her physically and then what she thinks of herself internally. So the contrasting perspectives or the differing perspectives would be the exterior view that others have of her and the interior view that we gain through the author's revelation of her thoughts. So it is a matter or conflict of man versus man with an external view of Mrs. Mallard's personality and maybe her physical traits also. But then also it is a different point of view where we get into Mrs. Mallard's mind and we see the conflict that she has with herself, which is man versus self. So clearly we would pick Thesis 1B because it gives more direction of not only what our perspective is, but how we plan on attacking the question. Looking at 2A and 2B, 2A reads, the description of the spring day outside is pleasant and happy. Versus 2B, which reads, the description of the spring day outside Mrs. Mallard's window suggests the theme of the story that even in the face of death, life renews itself in a strong, joyous manner. Now, the subject of 2A is the description of the spring day outside. Now, that may seem like a clearly stated subject because it has a lot of words in it. However, it's still pretty vague what exactly is being targeted here. We don't exactly know what the description is, and we don't know where outside we're talking about. Now, looking at the verb, once again, the verb is simply a linking verb. So it is not strong. But then we have the predicate adjectives of pleasant and happy, which now we do have a description of the spring day. The description of the spring day is that it is pleasant and happy. The only issue is that that is not enough information for us to write an essay on. Simply stated, that's enough right there. Now, looking at 2B, it starts off the same exact way. The description of the spring day outside Mrs. Mallard's window. Now, here we are given a little more information as to where this is taking place. We are given insight on this being Mrs. Mallard's window. It's not outside anywhere. It's outside Mrs. Mallard's window. And then we are given a different verb. Instead of a linking verb, we are given an action verb, such as suggests. And then what this is saying is that just to provide it with more direction, the description of this spring day suggests the theme of the story or the main idea of the story. And then even more direction is provided for what this theme is. That even in the face of death, life renews itself in a strong, joyous manner. So basically, this thesis is trying to say that the theme of the story is this. So, yes, the description of the spring day may be pleasant and happy, but 2B is taking it a little bit further with saying that that description is also suggesting the theme of the story, and this right here is the theme of the story. Now we can write an essay that this is the theme of the story because we have some explaining to do on why this should be the main idea and not anything else, and how we see this being the main idea over the entire story. So here, 2B would be the best choice. So let's answer some questions on this to see how much you understand. Let's go to check for understanding. Let's go to check for understanding. Okay. Check for understanding. All right. Number one, you're going to answer these questions in your notebook. You don't have to write the questions, but number one says, and you can use your notes for this. What is a thesis statement? You're going to answer this right now in your notebook. Number two says, what will it help to do with your essay? A thesis statement, that is. What will a thesis statement help to do with your essay? And then number three says, what's in a good thesis? So I didn't have you to write down anything for number three, but we did discuss it. So what do you remember about this and put in your own words? So answer those. You get a few minutes and we'll move on. We're working though. You can't lay your head down. No, you can't. No, you got to do that at home. Now, right now, we're answering the question. Sir. 492. Okay, so at the top, so yesterday I was talking about there's three different appeals that you can take when you're talking about persuading an audience. There's three different appeals, Mr. Bryant, who should not be sitting back there at all. There's three different appeals that you can take. The first appeal, Miss Nightia, the first appeal is logic. Okay, when you appeal to someone logically, that means that you're backing your reasoning, you're backing your opinion up with reasoning. Okay, that's what logic is. So yesterday, Sandra read for us at the top, it says, being able to judge the value of a single statement is not enough to make you a skilled consumer of information. You also must be able to use logic, which is the science of reasoning, to judge relationships between statements. Okay, so you must be able to judge the relationship between statements. So you're probably thinking, how is it that I am going to start off this essay? And how am I going to discuss these topics when I'm actually writing? Okay, you have a couple of different choices. You can discuss them in a cause and effect manner, or you can discuss them in a compare and contrast manner. And you even have the option of doing an analogy also. So we're going to go over those today. One more time, Julian.
A cause is an event or action that directly brings about another event.
Okay, so a cause, thank you, is an event or action that directly brings about another event. What is the next event that comes after a cause, Julian?
Effect.
Okay, what is an effect, Julian?
An effect is direct or logical outcome of an event or action.
Okay, it's the direct or at least the logical one. Okay, so if we cannot understand specifically what happened literally, then we might use a certain amount of reasoning to come to a certain conclusion about this effect coming from this cause. So that's what you're going to do if you choose to do a cause and effect on your paper. You're going to show that because of your thesis, these events, or because of these events, you hold this thesis to be true. So words that signal a cause and effect relationship include because, therefore, so, and since. Recognizing causes and effects can be especially helpful to you in studying history and science. For example, in 1948, gold was discovered in California's Sacramento Valley, which is the cause. The effect is thousands of prospectors flocked to the area. Because this is a cause and effect relationship, we can readily assume that the second would not have occurred without the first happening prior. So, if gold was not discovered, thousands of people would not have flocked to California. Next, in the late 1800s, railroad lines were extended into many parts of the West. That is the cause. The effect is cowboys no longer needed to drive cattle hundreds of miles to railroad stations. So if railroad lines had not been extended to many parts of the West, cowboys would still have to drive their cattle hundreds of miles in order to find the railroad stations. But because it was eventually extended all across the country as the Transcontinental Railroad, they no longer had to drive their cattle so far north just to reach the railroad stations. One thing to watch out for is a false cause and a fallacy. A false cause is when one event follows another, we must be careful not to assume that the first event caused the second. An event that has nothing to do with an event that follows is called a false cause. So just because an event came first, that doesn't mean that the event that followed is the effect of the first event. There literally has to be a relationship between the two. If the two events do not relate, then it is not a cause and effect relationship. Also, there is a way for your reasoning to be wrong. Reasoning that is wrong is called a fallacy. For the definition of fallacy, copy down number 2 and number 4. Number 2 reads, a misleading or unsound argument, and number 4, as it pertains to logic, reads, any of various types of erroneous reasoning that render arguments logically unsound. And what this means is that there could be various errors in the reasoning that would make the logic incorrect. A fallacy is a professional way of telling someone that they are wrong or that they do not know what they are talking about. It is when an error is in their reasoning. So let's go to compare and contrast. Write down the definition for a compare and contrast. Write down the definition for a compare and contrast.
On the back of her?
On the same paper. Yeah, you can put it on the chart. Compare and contrast. So it says a comparison is what, Chris?
Comparison shows how two or more things, equal places, and things like these are
Okay, thank you. So, and write that down. Comparison shows how two or more things, these could be people, places, events, or ideas, or objects, how they are alike. Louder.
Contrast shows how two or more things differ.
Thank you. So a contrast, we do a compare and contrast all the time. Okay, you might see some new student in school, and because she's new and you're not used to looking at her, you might start to compare her to Bae, and you might be like, oh, wait a minute, Bae isn't like her. Okay, but how is Bae different from her? How is Bae the same as her? You do a compare and a contrast. Or you may, when you start to work, you may start to, Miss Marshall, you should be writing. Or when you start working, you might decide to leave one job for another career move, and you might start to do a comparison on how those two things are alike and different. Or before you actually get the job, before you decide to go to that job, you might do a compare and contrast to see if that is worth you making your move. Okay, so a contrast shows how two or more things differ. Words that indicate differences include but, however, on the other hand, and unlike. Using comparison and contrast can help you understand the relationship between two topics. The Venn diagram below compares and contrasts the northern and southern American colonies in the late 1700s. The circle on the left compares the northern colonies as far as farms, crops, exports, slavery, and cities. And the circle on the right compares the same, but for the southern colonies. In the middle, we see what both of them have in common. At the bottom of there, make sure you get the 3 bullet points for comparison and contrast. You have to make sure that you cover all the main categories. Okay, make sure all the main categories are covered. Next, are the same sorts of things compared across categories. And lastly, is the information presented in an unbiased way. Okay, make sure you aren't getting information that favors one over the other. Okay, and at the bottom here's the hot tip. Using comparisons and contrast can help you make decisions by providing you with a way to evaluate an issue's strengths and weaknesses. You got it down? And the last one is an analogy. Okay, the last one is an analogy on page 494. Copy down the definition for an analogy. An analogy is what, Sherry? It's at the top of 494. Y'all was second, Philip.
An analogy shows the type of relationship between two things.
Thank you. Okay, so usually we use an analogy when someone doesn't understand in our own literal, logical language what we're talking about. We have to put it in layman's terms for them. We have to break it down or maybe even dumb it down so they understand what it is that we're talking about, because they just don't get the point when we're trying to explain it to them literally and logically. So, for example, I know that Devin hoops. Okay, Devin is also a brilliant kid, so I probably wouldn't have to utilize this on him. But someone who plays a sport, if I'm talking about a certain issue and I'm making a certain point, I'm trying to drive it home and he just isn't understanding, I might want to use a basketball analogy so that he understands. And I will make the same type of comparison. Okay, so I might say, hey Devin, you know, I understand that girl don't pay you any attention or anything, but trying to holler at a female is very similar to making a free throw shot. Okay? Sometimes you miss and sometimes you get it.
I'll miss.
You know, it's hit or miss. Okay? You use an analogy. You use the same type of comparison, but in a totally different context. An analogy shows a type of relationship between two things. You can use analogies to help explain unfamiliar concepts by comparing them to other, more well-known concepts. For example, an analogy is similar to a simile. However, instead of just using the words like or as to compare two or more things, you would use the words like or as to take one situation that someone is completely familiar with and use that as the ticket for explaining another situation that they are probably having a hard time understanding. The only requirement is that the relationship between the two comparisons has to be very close. And the expectation is that the familiar situation will help to explain the unfamiliar situation. You can also use analogies when you are trying to persuade other people to agree with your opinion. Analogies are especially useful when you want to refute an argument. To evaluate whether an analogy is valid, ask yourself the following questions. Are the situations being compared really similar? Are the situations of equal importance? Is the analogy being used to hide a weak argument? So I'm going to give you an example of how I would do a cause and effect on my thesis.
Don't you lie to me! And where you get this from? Oh God! God sees everything!
So that's my quote right there. Then this is the context. I'm sure it's right. That's the perfect song. Okay, so notice how in the context, which is very similar to the book, which the movie and the book aren't always the same when it comes to certain material. But the context shows that there is something that's also watching. So God sees everything is also symbolized by this sign. which is actually how we discussed it also. So when we watched the summary of The Great Gatsby, we had two different areas where we wrote down the things that we discussed the book from my perspective, and the other popular things that everyone usually discusses the book from SparkNotes. And that was one of the things that we discussed the book from, was how different objects in the story seem to be constantly watching someone or something, or some type of attention is being called to the eyes. And so when I get to writing my story, I'm going to utilize my thesis to unfold how God is working in different people and objects that have eyes, to see the actions of everybody and use that to watch their behavior in order to judge them at the end. And because I used the word judge in my thesis, I'm also going to want to talk about how Nick Carraway was trying not to judge. He was given that advice not to judge. So here's how I would use a cause and effect on. Here's how I would use a cause and effect on my thesis. Okay, based on that thing. I would say that basically God allows bad situations to occur, and or he punishes people based on their sins. Okay, so that's the cause and effect on it, which means that because people sin, the effect is death or punishment. Okay, because people sin, Cherokee, turn around please. Because people sin, Alex, put that away please. Because people sin, their fate or the effect is an untimely death or punishment. An example of using a compare and contrast, I use that one for number 5. If you chose number 5, if you chose number 5 off the list, which says that's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. Did anyone pick that one as their thing? Okay, Daisy said that in chapter 1. So let's go ahead and look at the context in which she said that. She said that's the best thing a little girl can be in this world is a beautiful little fool. Beautiful little rat. A beautiful little rat? Is that what you said? Okay. Oh, all right.
That's the dead girl that died in the pool. It was push.
Hey, Kels. See, over this one, she's doing that by herself.
That girl that got the pool.
Gatsby.
Is that Daisy?
Yes, Daisy and Jordan. Daisy.
The dinner is 7.
So this is chapter 1, where Nick is invited over to their house the first time to meet all of them, even though that's her cousin. He's re-seeing her after a long time. And then they go out onto the veranda for lunch.
That's why I came over.
It's about the butler's nose. Strange time from back.
I hate that bird hole.
Nikki, I heard a rumor that you were getting married to a girl out west.
It's a lie. I'm too poor.
They have to be old so they're dying quick.
Can we talk about something else? Anything. Crops. You're making me feel uncivilized, Daisy. Civilization's going to pieces. Have you read Rise of the Colored Empire? That's what got it. Everybody ought to read it. The idea is that it's up to us, the dominant race, to watch out of these other races without control of things.
Sounds very profound, lately. You read deep books with long words in them.
It's been proved. Scientific.
We've got to beat them down.
Notice the gestures and facial expressions.
You got no residence?
Gestures and facial expressions takes the place of words.
Excuse me? Right.
Who do we think is on the phone?
I'm sorry.
Who do we think is on the phone? Nope, not that.
This Mr. Gaskell.
Oh, there's Mitch.
My head. Don't talk. I want to hear what happens.
Something happening?
Why is the husband bothering me?
I don't.
Tom's got some woman in me.
Got some woman.
She might have the decency not to telephone at dinner time. Don't you think?
Oh.
I love seeing you at my table, Nikki. You remind me of a rose. An absolute rose, doesn't he?
So, I'm not even thinking like they're going to go on top. Right there? To the Air Club.
Nikki, stay.
I have to work early. Nonsense.
There's so much to talk about.
Let's get for a drink or two. None of us could ignore that fifth guest's shrill metallic urgency.
Nick.
What?
It's just, well, you see, I think everything's terrible anyhow.
Really?
Yes. I've been everywhere and seen everything and done everything. I've had a very bad time, Ricky. I'm pretty cynical about everything.
Your dog. She talks and eats and everything.
Hallie. Oh, yes. Listen, Nick. When she was born, Tom was God knows where. With God knows who. And I asked the nurse if it was a boy or a girl. And she said it was a girl. And I wept. I'm glad it's a girl. And I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl in this world can be. A beautiful little fool. All the bright, precious things fade so fast. And they don't.
Okay, so that's the context in which she used it. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't understand. Somebody knocking at the door?
Man, if you don't get the
Somebody knocking at the door? So, when we watch the context in which it's used in, then we know why she's saying that. Why is she saying that? Why did Daisy say that? Based on the background information, why did Daisy have to say that?
Because like what she went through.
Okay, what she went through with guys, Zacchaeus?
Oh no, this was something different, bro. All right, is Tom a racist? Because he said something about you gotta.
Right. We get the impression that he's a racist, but and that builds onto his character that makes him this barbaric brute that runs over women, that kind of upsets Daisy and makes her make the statement that she makes. That's the best thing that a woman can be in this world, as a beautiful little fool in this time. Because in this time, women didn't have the rights that they had. So we would probably want to do a compare and contrast between the advantages of men in the 1920s compared to the advantages of women in the 1920s. So we would do a Venn diagram to see what are the advantages that men had at that time, Devin, versus what are the advantages that women had. And of course, the advantages of men would probably go off the scale because women were just gaining their rights. Back then, we didn't have women who would stick up for themselves and would be independent, doing their own thing. They had to submit to their husband, okay? Unless, in very small instances, there was someone like a celebrity, like you had a Jordan Baker, who was a little bit in control back then, only because she was a professional golfer. So then we were trying to see what both of them have in common. So when we discuss in our paper this thesis, and we find our reasoning, that's how we would use our reasons to back up our thesis, is we would do that comparison, okay? This is why it was said in the movie that the best thing that a woman can be is a beautiful little fool, okay? Because women and men did not blah, 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 blah. Men had this, women did not have that, whatever. Okay, what are the main things that were of an issue in that time, in 1920? So you probably would want to go back to the Jazz Age video that we watched back in the old room. You probably want to go back to that video because it does give some insight on what women were gaining in their gender issues in society. So across your two categories, make sure that you're doing the same type of comparison. Number 14, maybe somebody in here picked number 14 as their thing, which says, a bad driver is only safe until she meets another bad driver. Did anyone use that one? A bad driver is only safe until she meets another bad driver. Anyone use that one?
No.
Okay. So if we use that one, of course, again, we would go to the page, look at the context in which it's being used in, which Nick told that to Daisy told that to Jordan because of Jordan's carelessness. And when we try to make an analogy of that, what could you compare that to in real life? When we say a bad driver is only safe until they meet another bad driver, what can we compare that to in real life? Okay.
It might be somebody, two bipolar people in a relationship.
Two bipolar people in a relationship, give me more. If we say a bad driver is only good until they meet another bad driver, give me more. Who can add on to, well, I like the idea of a relationship. Who can add on to that? So we have this idea that someone who demonstrates this certain bad or annoying characteristic, you're going to be cool until you meet somebody else who can demonstrate that just as good as you.
Right.
Eric.
Can it be like how like if you're like a bad driver and then like you're driving somewhere but like you're safe because like you get away with it and then like you meet somebody else that like do the same thing and like it makes it even worse?
Okay, and so how can we relate that to a different situation though? Because that's basically what it's saying here. How can we relate that to a different situation? Mr. McGee, can you add on to it?
All I can say, basically, what it's saying is if you're a bad driver or you think you're a bad driver, you can relate that to people also because you can say, if you met a bad person, you thought you was bad, but then when you saw a man, it makes you realize like there's certain things that I don't get that this other person has. That's what can work.
I get what you're saying. He's saying basically it's always somebody badder than you.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. We see tough people in school. You know what I'm saying? You might see some of the 12th graders. They think they, the essay something. Okay, they think they this and that, and they walk around like they something don't stink. Okay, but at the end of the day, we know that there's always somebody bigger and badder who can definitely go toe to toe with them. One day you're gonna meet your match. Definitely.
Yeah, they meet me and KP, you know, I smack people. KP smack people. I choke people, you feel me?
Okay.
So
you're saying that one day somebody gonna choke you up?
No, that ain't happening. What I'm saying is, them 12th graders that be talking crazy, while I'm choking them, KP gonna smack them.
But, what's the,
It's not gonna come back on me. It skips me.
But, and I'm glad you said the word come back. I'm glad you said that phrase, because basically what we think of here is karma. What goes around, comes around. Okay? Alright, so just before we go, let's do a little check for understanding very, very, very quickly. I know. Thank you, Mr. Timekeeper. Alright, last thing, before we go. What is reasoning? What is reasoning?
Come on, man.
No, don't give me that.
It's like, reasoning is like using evidence to support your answer.
Basically, it's the process of using evidence to support your answer or
I said it best.
Like it's like you using different types. Like you using like we doing arguments or judgments.
Judgments.
Like or yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're trying to make a conclusion.
Yes. Judgments, conclusions, and what's another one?
Inferences.
Inferences. Good.
Yeah, KP.
Hold on. Just a second. What's the purpose of logic? What's the purpose of logic? The purpose of logic.
The purpose of logic is to like make. I'm not gonna look at that. The purpose of logic is to it's to like make a point about your argument.
To make a point about your argument. Also to utilize a certain process
of elimination.
Not exactly a certain process we just discussed.
Reasoning.
Okay.
Yeah,
the purpose of logic is to use reasoning in order to bring about that argument. Okay. And the last two. What are the three different forms of logic? that we wrote down. What are 3 different forms we took notes on? Compare and contrast. Cause and effect.
Analogy.
And an analogy. Last one. What type of diagram is very useful in a compare and contrast?
Venn diagram.
Venn diagram. You won! Have a great weekend! Now, let's begin the planning so you may start the drafting stage for your essay. It is time to create an outline that will guide the direction for your entire paper. It is assumed that you have followed all of the necessary steps to create your thesis statement by this time. It is also recommended that you have some idea of the objections that you would like to overcome in this essay. Begin by breaking the thesis idea into its logical parts. Like other essays you write, this essay will have an introductory paragraph that will state or imply the thesis point, followed by a number of paragraphs in which you will present evidence to clarify, develop, and illustrate that point. Each of those paragraphs will have a topic idea that will be a logical subdivision of the thesis idea. Like the thesis sentence itself, the topic sentence of a paragraph should be clear, specific, and unified. You should know exactly what you mean to accomplish in the paragraph. As part of your plan, then, write out a topic sentence for each of your paragraphs. Since you must be certain that you will have a focused, clear point for each paragraph in the final paper, it's a good idea to write out these topic ideas as complete sentences. You will find that you are less likely to fool yourself about what you mean to do in the paragraph if you have stated its purpose explicitly and fully at the beginning. Also, check carefully to see that the topic sentence is indeed a logical subdivision of the thesis idea. So basically, what you want to do is take a really good look at your thesis statement and plan a sentence for every major point that you would like to make. Each of those sentences will be the topic sentence of your paragraphs. And then you need to select supporting information to back up that topic sentence. Remember, every sentence in your paragraph should be supporting the topic sentence because the topic sentence is what that paragraph is about. And remember, every paragraph should be about 5 to 7 complete sentences. The reason you are doing this is because you want to make sure that you stay on topic with supporting your thesis statement. And so each topic sentence to each paragraph should match and support your thesis statement. This way, everything will be aligned.